I don't think there is a way out except the crash. And I think the crash is going to be so big, it's going to take everybody out. This crash is going to make Noah's flood look like a rainstorm.
SDBullion.com is a high-volume physical gold, silver, and precious metal dealer. At SDBullion.com, you can order your guaranteed physical precious metal bullion products online, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Visit SDBullion.com for more information.
Welcome to another Silver Doctors exclusive interview. Today I'm excited to have a first-time visitor, Mr. Darryl Schoon. He's an educator, an author, as well as a video commentator. Today he's joining us to share his thoughts on the global economy and, more importantly, to share his analysis as to where we're currently at and where he believes we're headed in the future. So Darryl Schoon, welcome to Silver Doctors.
Hey, thanks for having me, Mike.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to join us here. Definitely looking forward to finding out what's in your mind. And so actually you were recommended by some of the viewers here. They put in the comment section, why don't you get Darryl Schoon on here? So here we are, finally have a chance to have you on the show. So I'm looking forward to finding out what's on your mind. But more importantly, before we dive into the more in-depth subject matter, because we have the Fed situation, we got the Iran debacle. So a lot of things we're going to cover. But before we get into that, we're halfway through the year 2019. What are some things that has Darryl Schoon most concerned, or what are you keeping your eye on the most these days?
You know, it's like watching a hoop that's being pushed. I mean, it's this momentum, the markets. I mean, that's what we're all talking about, the markets, all right? The markets basically collapsed in 2008. They collapsed in 2008. And what the Fed did, what all central banks did for the first time, is they engaged in something called quantitative easing, which was a direct injection of capital into the markets, into the banks to keep them going. The situation was so bad, Mike, they never had to do this before. To restart their little game of credit and debt, all they had to do was lower the interest rate, make credit cheaper. People would come in, borrow the money, put it back in the markets, all right? What happened is it was so bad, they slashed the interest rates down to 0% basically. In 2008, it didn't do anything. So what the Feds did, central banks around the world, China, Europe, everywhere, is that they started putting money directly into the game for the first time. They never had to do this before. And what happened is that new money did not, quote, revive the economy. All right. What it did do, it was put into the economies, and that money all went into financial assets. All right. The people who had access to the money, who could borrow cheaper, used that cheap money to buy stocks, bonds, real estate, whatever they had, because these are the people who are at the top of the economic pile. All right. Real demand, however, is driven by those at the bottom. All right. By people, by wage earners, just by people. Demand for food, cars, rent, housing, etc. Clothes, education. These are real people. This is what they call Main Street. All right, let's go to shorthand. The money never reached Main Street. The money was cut off, went directly to Wall Street, to the investors, to the financial markets, and they used that money within their own little sub-economy and drove all financial assets higher. All right, why? Because they had all these players in that Wall Street economy, in the financial economy, had access to the same cheap credit, which drove financial assets, stocks, bonds, real estate, commodities higher. All right? And that's been going on for 10 years. Okay? And every time it looks like it's getting shaky, they put more money in, or they went into negative interest rates. All right? So what happened is last year it sort of topped out and markets started falling. So what the Feds did is that they just jammed it and they hit it even harder. All right? And they kept going up. But I want you to notice, Mike, what has happened is volatility. All right? 2 years ago, people were going, wow, man, look, there's no volatility. Where did it go? All right? Because investors were so sure that they were going to get rescued, They would just absorb all these little bad news things, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because they were making so much money. What happened is last year, they started freaking out. So they started pulling their money out of the game, and you started seeing wild swings, bigger highs, bigger lows. All right? So you ask me today, where are we at? We are at where we were a year ago with larger swings of volatility. And my sense is this is an indication of the bottom falling out.
Really?
Hey, you can only play a Ponzi scheme so long. You know, nothing lasts forever, good times or bad times. But this is the end of a 300-year-old game of credit and debt, and they maxed it out. The only people who aren't underwater in debt are the ones at the very top who own the game. And they're also leveraged in debt. They're just happen to be the only ones left liquid.
Now, do you think, for example, that, it sounds like the air is coming out of the bubble, and so there's a talks of an economic slowdown, and so if we're at the end of a 300-year-old cycle of debt and credit, as you just mentioned, do they have any more tools in their toolkit? Because we hear about lower interest rates and some things that they can possibly consider. They got something called modern monetary theory. They're floating out all these new experiments. Are they just the beginning?
Listen, I don't know if you've had a dog that took a dump, all right, and what the place smelled like after it did, all right? Well, this modern monetary theory is that. It's a dump. Let me tell you something. Once you know who they are, you can figure out what they're going to do next, all right? Now, all this stuff about printing money and giving it to people and the guaranteed income is the next step. Why? Because the people who are at the bottom, mainstream, are tapped. I mean, they're tapped, Mike. All right? Now, those boys at the top who are vacationing in Vail, all right, who, float around at the most expensive hotels, they have no idea what's going on down there. All right? I mean, they're probably not even talking to their relatives anymore, all right, who are really pressed to the wall. They only talk to each other, all right? And they're all doing well. But they know certain things aren't good, but what the heck? They've never been richer, okay? Now, the truth of the matter is this. Markets are a function of supply and demand and capital, all right? It doesn't matter if there's a demand for food when people have no money. If they have no money to buy the food, you have starving people, all right? Now, the rich people at the top go, oh, well, if they worked harder, but, 3 jobs ain't going to cut it if 2 didn't. 4 jobs isn't going to cut it if 2 didn't. Oh, if they should only work harder, that's a great thing to tell yourself, but it doesn't make economies work, all right? So what they're going to be forced to do, I believe, is they're going to be forced to give money away, put people in bank accounts. I mean, what is food stamps except that anyway? What are rent vouchers that except that anyway? All right? What are safety nets except that anyway? They are devices put in place in a system that is patently unfair. Now, what I mean by unfair is this. In a credit and debt economy, those who are closest to the fountains of credit, they're the ones who come out on top. The reason why bankers have all the money, even though we have all these banking crises, is they are closest, they create the credit, right? So they're the ones who take the credit off the top and place the bets, and they can leverage it better than anybody else. To the wage owner, to the guy who has to earn his dollar, who makes his money dollar for dollar and has to place his bet dollar for dollar, he can't leverage this thing, all right? So he's at the short end. The boys who are closest to the fountains of credit have an advantage over everybody else, all right? Now, it looks like it's fair. Well, no, it really doesn't look like it's fair. All right. It looks like it's horribly unfair. All right. But the reason we're told that it's fair is that some people are making so much money about it, they want the victims not to feel so bad. All right. And they want everybody to feel that the ones who aren't surviving, it's because they're lazy. It's because they're just not, creative enough. It's just like they're not good enough. All right. That in Darwin's survival of the fittest survive, and the ones who aren't surviving, well, hey, you just aren't making the cut. You're probably 4 feet tall and you're going for an NBA tryout. Good luck.
Now, a part of this not fair, and so the Main Street is clearly starting to feel that now, because we're hearing more about income inequality, and even the billionaires, those that have the means and the resources,
are talking
about how unfair it is. And so
they're the richest boy in the game, not the richest, but he manages more money than anybody else on the planet. And in fact, he's cut off anybody else investing in his fund for years, has said, unless we do something radical, this game is going to burn up. I mean, this is a guy, who the World Bank puts their money with.
Yeah.
You're not going to hear Larry Fink at BlackRock say this. You're not going to hear the boys at Goldman Sachs say this, because they're just predators. That's a nice word for financial, entrepreneurs. Right? I mean, they don't use a gun to hold you up. You know why? They don't have to. They've got a system that does it for them. They've got politicians that pass the laws for them. All right? I mean, sure, I understand about supply and demand. Sure, I understand about free markets and free choices. All right? But when the game is rigged from the get-go, when the game is rigged with the currency itself, who creates the currency? Who creates the credit? Who has access to it? I mean, it's like, it's sort of like talking about sin, when you got to have sex and nobody else can. When you get to have as many wives or as many girlfriends you want and nobody else can, and then you can talk about sin all you want. You can wear those clerical collars. You can just get up on that pulpit and be real good on Sunday morning. Yeah. Because you've got it all. The game handed it to you. So all these boys at the top can talk like that. All right? And everybody, I tell you, I understand wanting to believe. I totally understand wanting to believe. Because without wanting to believe, you've got nothing. Okay? I mean, you've basically got nothing. Well, Mike, all I can say is this. Wanting to believe, you're sucking gas. You're sucking gas right now. They haven't given you anything left to want to believe on, except desperate thought that somehow it's going to turn out for you.
Right. Now you factor in, breaking it down the way you did. And so not only are there several other distractions that can be looked at as helpful or to speed things up. So we have the trade war, we have the Iran situation, we have this situation back and forth. Looks like now India now is going to retaliate with some tariffs that they're going to pass on.
We've already screwed them over. We've already levied tariffs against the United States, against India. All right? There are no trade wars going on except ours. All right? And I am speaking just figuratively. It ain't my trade war. When I say ours, I'm saying collectively America. Why am I saying America? Well, I happen to be American. All right? I happen to be a U.S. citizen. I didn't want a trade war. I don't want tariffs. Trump does. Why? Because that's the way he thinks you can negotiate. All right? Fine, because that's the way he does. He has stiffed everybody he's ever been in business with. Okay? And all these fools, you know, I know we need a change. I mean, I know we need systemic change. I mean, far before anybody else did. All right? But that's no reason to have this fool where he is. That's the reason why he got in, is we need a systemic change. I mean, what a joke. Yeah. 2016 elections, you know who was in the two presidential candidates who represented the system? The Democrats. Hillary Clinton represented the system. What a turn of events. The Democrats made a living. They got votes because they were against the system. And in 2016, who stood for the system? The Democrats. And who stood for change? This fool. He was an outsider. But just because he's an outsider didn't mean he was going to do the right thing.
Yeah. Now, isn't it, I mean, so do you find it to be coincidental, or was it all a part of the strategy, narrative, or whatever? Because a lot of people think he's a part of the establishment, deep state, whatever people want to call it. Then some people say he's really on his own, fighting for freedom behind the scenes.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. You don't gotta snort meth for 2 weeks to think like to be scared in America. You know? I mean, people are so freaked out, they'll see shit anywhere. Oh, they're doing it. Oh, he did it. Oh, they're already one step ahead of us. You know? Oh, it's them. You know, listen. I was at a conference in 2016, Freedom Fest. Okay, Freedom Fest. Put on by my friend. All right? I mean, yes, he interviews me like you do. All right? And he kept asking me to go on, and I kept turning him down. Frankly, because I hear the ads on his program. I don't pay, all this stuff. And, I'm an odd man out. I never voted in a presidential election in my life. I'm 74, Mike, 74. I graduated with a degree in political science in 1966, in the 60s. I read books on power politics when I was in high school. I knew about the war. I knew about this deep state. I knew who controlled things. Okay? And when I graduated with a degree in political science, I decided not even to register and not to vote. You know who I knew my enemies were? The Republicans. And you know what I knew? The Democrats were the last people I know who would defend me. All right? I walked away. And not that I don't have attitudes, not that I don't have opinions, but I never voted in the presidential election for a reason. And then finally, when that right was taken away from me, I didn't care. I didn't care. All right? That's how cynical and enraged I am about the system. Well, so finally in 2016, I decided to go and appear at this conference. All right? And I got up there. And these boys are all the people you're talking about. They're doing this to it. You know what? I got up there and I gave my talk and I drilled down into them to show them I knew far more than they did about the corruption, about the deep state, and who was in control. All right? What I want to tell them is this, and a lot of them are probably listening to your program, and I understand it. I know how they think, and I know why they think, and I know that the boys who are really running the game are not ready because they don't care about it. It's not that kind of conspiracy. It's a collusion of special interests who benefit by people being sidelined and marginalized and ignorant and non-participating. All right? So I've agreed to non-participate. All right? For my mental health. All right? Just for that. All right? I mean, I know people who vote. I know people who are real mad at me for not voting. And I don't care. I made my choice 50 years ago. All right. And you know what? At least in an Italian saying, I could say this: my hands are clean. You know?
Yeah, and that's definitely, you know, I appreciate you sharing that, because a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to share that type of information just because they don't want to, you know, divulge their personal stance or whatever. But the fact that you said you kept your hands clean, you know, that's very respectful. So I appreciate you sharing that with us.
I know about the deep state. All right. And I know that Hillary Clinton represented the state more than Trump, the deep state. Trump does not represent the deep state. He only represents himself and his own goddamn self-interest. Don't go around hanging your crap on him thinking he's going to save you because the same people don't like him. That's like thinking Nixon was going to save you. They rolled Nixon because he opened the door to China. Watergate was a setup. They knew that they were going to, you know, they hated what Kissinger did. Kennedy was assassinated, and so was his brother, because probably he offended a lot of people, and one of them were the bankers. What people don't know is one of the first acts that Kennedy did when he was elected was to issue silverback money out of the Treasury. This is the first time the Treasury issued money since 1913. All right? Lyndon Johnson, 6 months after he became president, the first thing he did was recall every one of the silver dollars, and they sold all the silver that the Fed had, that the Treasury had, so they could never do it again. A biopic is coming out where Jackie Kennedy says she believed Lyndon Baines Johnson had her husband murdered. That was her feeling. Let me tell you something about the Kennedys. They hated LBJ. They hated him. And right before the DNC, convention, they got a phone call. And they were told, you accept LBJ as your running mate, or you're not getting the nomination. They put the gun to their head at that moment. 1 year later, it was somebody else's gun. But let me tell you, it was the same people who had the trigger pulled. All right? So all these dicks out there, these testosterone fuel, you're taking away my freedom, fools. And I'm not saying they're fools because they're stupid. They're fools because they're naive. They think other people are being manipulated. They think the sheeple are being manipulated. They're the ones being manipulated. And you know my deal on this whole thing, Mike?
What's that?
I'm back off of it. I don't think there's a way out. I don't think there is a way out except the crash. And I think the crash is going to be so big, it's going to take everybody out. This crash is going to make Noah's flood look like a rainstorm. This crash is going to take them all out. All right? I believe that what we're in for is a setup, a cosmic setup by the forces that created the universe. I believe that the boy who created, or it, not the boy, God or whatever it is, I'm going to just lay it out because I don't really care anymore. I believe that it set this incredible motion called life in this with an incredible vision. And so I think that it got set in motion and it really went off the wheels. All right? Because we were given free will. I absolutely believe we were created in the image of God. We were all given it. All of us. Even the people I consider responsible for the situation we're in. All right? Yeah. We are no better, no worse, and we're cut from the same DNA. All right?
Yeah.
Light. Yeah. And we all got free will. And it was the worst thing that happened in one way. Except we love our free will, all right? And some of the people have taken that free will and taken everything away from everybody else, okay? And manipulated the media so nobody even knows it, okay? I mean, people don't realize, I'm so cynical about watching this game and thinking that it's going to get better, because I want it to get better too. But I no longer, and I believe it is going to get better, but I believe it's going to get better not because people are going to get better. Well, Mike, I believe the right thing is going to happen. And you know what I believe it is? I don't know if you know about Bucky Fuller, Buckminster Fuller, geodesic dome and all that crap. Well, my friend from law school knew Bucky really well. I mean, really did. When Bucky was old, all right? My friend's really optimistic and he likes thinking positively, and we're all going to have this better world that Bucky promised. Bucky said that humanity now has the tools to create a higher standard of living for every human being on the planet for the first time in the history of humanity. Everybody loves Bucky because Bucky had a great human heart. Okay? What they don't know is that Bucky wrote his last book. Next to the last book was called Critical Path. And in that book, in 1982, Mike, he said this: mankind is entering a period of unprecedented crises. All right? Unprecedented. And I told my friend Marshall from law school, who knew Bucky, I said, Bucky knew more about humanity than anybody else. He knew about the Black Plague. He knew about all these catastrophes, everything. And he used those words, a crisis without precedence that will transform humanity and bring us together in one cooperative whole with a higher standard of living than ever before. But he said the way we're going to get there was a crisis we could not even condense. We could not even imagine. All right? Yeah. Bucky died the next year after writing Critical Path. Let me give you another little aside about this. Bucky died in 1982. He told my friend Marshall in 1979 about a new molecule, a molecule that didn't exist at that time. Nobody even, and he and Marshall made this molecule. We have photos of it, all right? And he told Marshall that this molecule, and they made a model of it with 60 carbon atoms in it, had to exist. And someday it would be used in medicine. Bucky died in 1983. In 1985, 3 scientists discovered something called C60. It looked like a geodesic dome, which Bucky invented. All right? They called these new molecules Buckminster Fullerines after Bucky. Okay? 11 years later, they were awarded the Nobel Prize for discovering this new molecule. All right? In those 10 years, they found out that C60 kills cancer cells, all right? That it stopped the replication of HIV virus, okay? That it stopped symptoms of ALS in rats, all right? Now, nothing was ever done with this because you couldn't patent the goddamn thing. It existed naturally. They found it, the only place they found it was in a 250 million year old 600 gigaton deposit in Russia called shungite. But there it is. And in 2012, this is something you might want to Google on your own, or people might want to.
I definitely will.
Google C60.
Yeah.
In 2012, a study was published in Paris with researchers who've been working on this compound for 15 years, and they decided that nobody discovered its toxicity levels. In other words, how much C60 would take it to kill a laboratory rats. Okay? So they started this study. They had a control group they only gave water to, and because C60 is not soluble in water, they used olive oil, all right? And because they were in Paris, and one of the researchers was from Tunis, which they had the best extra virgin olive oil in the world, he probably bought a can of his olive oil from home to dissolve the C60 in. And so they used olive oil, water, and then olive oil with C60 and fed them to the rats. Okay? To figure out how much it would take to kill the rats. Well, they gave it to them every day for a week. No rats died. Wow. They figured that amount of C60, which is a carbon molecule that, body has nothing to do with, would kill them. Didn't. So what they did for the next 7 weeks, they gave them to them once a week. No rats died. So then they decided, well, we'll give it to them every 2 weeks. And they did until 7 months were up, and then they stopped doing anything. They just fed them naturally. Okay? They didn't know what to do. They figured they died in their first week. They didn't. Well, let me tell you something, Mike. The first rats that died were the control group. The fed that were just fed, they weren't given C60 or the olive oil. And they died at approximately 30 to 34 months. The average age of laboratory rats when they died. And they cut them open. And they had the usual symptoms of rats in the laboratories: pneumonia and tumors. Done. Well, all the other rats were still alive. The next rats that lived were the olive oil rats. They died around 40 months. They lived 19% longer than the water rats. Why? Because they were getting a dose. They had gotten 24 doses of extra virgin olive oil. So they lived 19% longer. Then they all died. The only rats that were left alive were the rats who had taken olive oil and C60, and they lived 90% longer. And when they died, they had no tumors and no pneumonia. Bucky was psychic, Mike. He was psychic.
Yeah.
This is the level of which reality operates on. We don't understand about life at all. So it is a crapshoot. It's a miracle. And you know what? My thought is this. The boys who set this in motion are going to clean off the table, and they're starting anew. There's going to be a cosmic reboot. And the ones who make it are the ones who have love in their heart. Not Christians, not Muslims, not atheists, not whatever. They got love in their heart. Yeah. And they're going to make it through to be the foundation of what's coming up. All right? And if you got some gold and silver, that'll help.
All right, with Darryl Schoon, it's been great, man. I definitely always enjoy connecting with you. For those that might just be coming across Darryl Schoon for the very first time, can you direct them or give them a little insight as to where, do you still write as much? Or
I only post my news things twice a week. All right. And I haven't written any articles for years, or I really haven't. Mm-hmm. Okay. My YouTube channel, Schoonworks, it's gotten over 500,000 hits almost now. 500. I haven't done a YouTube for 3 years. Okay, years. My articles I stopped writing, but you can find me at www.drschon.com, where I put these things out, and I've got a couple book projects in the works, so you might find me there, Mike. But basically, I pulled the manhole cover over my head.
Yeah.
I've already explained years ago credit and debt. I've already put my predictions out, and there's no reason for me to say anything. Yeah. So every once in a while, somebody like you will come and dig me up and call me up and see what I'm thinking. But otherwise, I got nothing vested in trying to convince people of anything. Yeah. You can't convince me, I can't convince you, and you can't convince them, and nobody ain't convincing each other. You know what? But we've all got our cards on the table. It's like Leibniz said, you're at the table, you gotta bet. I don't care what you know, but you gotta bet because you're at the table. So everybody has got their cards on the table. And we've already placing our bets. And we don't know when the house is gonna call the game.